Welcome to the Half Stacks with Paul and Steph.
Your go-to podcast for tech jabbers.
On today's episode,
Becoming a software engineer.
Hi, Paul.
hello.
You want to talk about how we learn to be software engineers?
Sure.
All right. So, Paul, when you were a wee little person, how did you learn how to start programming or building websites?
So I've always kind of been into tech, and so it kind of gave me a natural background. And then in high school, I took a web design course, so kind of did HTML, CSS. Um, and then I detoured and went off and did some restaurant work, and then finally came back to development and went to a boot camp to learn JavaScript, basically full stack development. That was pretty much my first kind of foray. I was between that and kind of like um, night classes and the boot camp. That's how I kind of got my intro into development.
Nice. So you're in between a boot camp and a self-taught. Would you say you're more self-taught than a boot camp person?
Oh, definitely more self-taught. The boot camp was not that good.
So what made you get into learning development? Like there are people that are interested in tech and don't go off and make it their job. But did you set out learning this stuff thinking I'm going to use this as my profession one day?
Yeah, or when I decided to kind of go back to school and went for both the night classes and boot camp, it kind of became this is going to be my job. I was kind of, to be completely honest, kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. Like I didn't really have a plan. It was kind of, this seems like a good idea. I'm really good at tech stuff, so I should be good at this. And I ended up really excelling at UI. For me, like I really enjoy it because I always say it's like I get to play with Legos all the time. Like HTML is my blocks, CSS is the coloring, and JavaScript makes it do. It just was something that fit me perfectly. I also, for some reason, the async nature of JavaScript, I understood almost immediately, and most people kind of struggle with that. Um, and so it kind of gave me a leg up there. I don't understand how I understood any of that because sometimes I sit there going, wait, what the hell happened here? And it turns out to be an async issue. Um, and it bites me in the butt, but for the most part, I get it.
Yeah, I think I started off in similar shoes. I I started building websites a little bit before high school, but it wasn't really building websites. It was like using a WYSIWYG where you can drag stuff around and then like you can flip it to view the source and you're like, whoa, I made all that. Or I didn't make all that, but I generated all that in the WYSIWYG, like something like Dreamweaver or something.
Hmm.
And then in high school, I had a friend that actually built websites. Like she knew like CSS and HTML. And when I told her very proudly that I used Dreamweaver, she was like, ew, right? And so then I was like, well, what do you use? And of course she was like, oh, I use Notepad on Windows, right? And I was like, oh, so you actually write the code that I use Dreamweaver to like kind of generate. So then I was like, okay, I have to learn how to do lists, right? Because this friend is cool and I want to be cool and I want to write it in Notepad and do everything by hand. So I remember struggling really hard with learning that. I'd be like, what's wrong with my div? How come my div doesn't have the blue outline like it's in my CSS? And it was always something like, oh, I forgot to link the CSS file, or I forgot to add the class name that is defined in my CSS file, right? But I never anticipated that this would become my job even at that time. Like I never was like, I'm gonna become a programmer and build websites for a living. It was actually all by accident. When I was a kid, or a teenager, I actually wanted to be a vet.
Hmm.
But then my biggest hang up with being a vet was that at the time I was scared of albino animals because they had red eyes. So that was
Hmm.
like, I don't know about this, but I really want to do this. But then I went off to the military for a short bit, and when I came back, I I landed a job building websites in Dreamweaver.
Back to Dreamweaver.
Yeah, and the whole it was like it was a very small agency, but it was a very much a Dreamweaver shop. You know, like there's right now in tech, there's like Java shops. This was a pure Dreamweaver shop, and this was like in 2005 or something like that, somewhere in there. So I don't think WordPress was big at the time. So, and content management systems weren't very big at the time. So they basically just used Dreamweaver as their content management. And I remember because I had all this knowledge of like CSS and how to properly do things, I would go in there and fix like minor issues with their CSS. And they just thought I was an absolute genius. They were like, whoa, how'd you do that? Whoa, like, how'd you do that? How'd you clean this all up? And when I told them about CSS classes, they were like, because they would just use Dreamweaver,
Right.
like the WYSIWYG, and like, do all their little clicking to get it looking the way they do, and they don't care about the generated code, right?
No.
But then from that job, I was able to land all the other jobs after it. And it was just like, it was it was literally like just like predestined, like you're gonna go down this path.
I
And
kind of feel the same when it comes to my career because, like, I kind of got out of the boot camp and I bounced around like a couple startups trying to, like, just develop my skills. And somehow I managed to pass the technical interview for an actual company and get hired. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm actually going to be an engineer now. And like, a lot of the engineers there like took me under their wing and were like, this is the proper way to do this. Like, you need to think about not just what's in front of you, but what's going to be in front of you 10 years, or not 10 years, but like a year down the road,
yeah,
of making sure that your code is understandable and maintainable for that long. um, and so, like, a lot of the concepts of not only front end development but actually back end, they kind of were really kind to me. And every time there was a lesson, it was like, let me just take in everything you could teach me. Like, just give me more and more and more, so that way, like, eh, I get that information. I think that's the biggest thing was is as much as like I didn't want to screw up because like they had taken a chance on me, I never turned down any opportunity that they gave me to try something new,
yeah,
because I was like, it's better to kind of fall gracefully with their help, but get the knowledge in the process than to just be like, no, I can't do that. That's not my wheelhouse or my domain.
yeah. I agree. So there's often a myth, or is it even a myth? Because I don't even know, but that in order to be good at programming, you have to be good at math. So
Mhm.
very honestly, how good are your math skills?
Uh, Probably not as good as they used to be. So, or actually, in college, I was originally going to go for computer science, and then I also had a math minor. Um, Computer science at the time, the college I was going to, basically, it was just one track. It was all of computer science, so they covered both hardware as well as software, and they required going into physics with calculus. And as good as I am at math, I was not good at the physics portion. And that's kind of why I ended up dropping computer science because I was like, I'm not good enough at this. Like, it's too above me. Like, I might be good at math, but I'm not good at this other portion. So obviously, computer or software development or computers is not my track. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
I
didn't,
don't, or I can see why they think that, but the truth is, like, I don't think you need it as much as you think you do.
yeah, like I didn't go to college. I took some college courses, but I never actually like completed it. Um, because I just am not that type of person to sit through a course. Like I'm like a let me at it,
Yeah,
I'll figure it out kind of person, right? Um, but in high school, the highest level of math I ever completed was like calculus, which I almost failed. So
same.
that says a lot about my math skills. But
I took calculus in high school and was like, uh-oh, because everything was kind of like seemed like just insane to me. And then all of a sudden it kind of clicked. And then I got up to basically like Calc 4, and they were like, so we have or like, we're going to take like all the dimensions past the fourth dimension and just throw them onto the squiggly line. And that could represent every dimension past the fourth. And I was like, I don't know what the like what's how do you have a fifth dimension? How do you have anything more than that? Like my mind like exploded at that point. It was like, okay, I can't do the math minor anymore.
so when it came to starting programming, how did you pick your first language to use?
It was actually pretty haphazard. So basically, when I looked into the boot camps, I kind of looked at a couple different ones, and at the time there was this one that offered three different full stack programs in one boot camp. And so me being me, I was like, oh, three's better than one. Yes, let's go for three all at once. Which anyone, even if you're learning development, probably can see that that was a dangerous course. So at the time they taught LAMP, which was, oh my god, I can't even remember the LAMP stack, but anyway, it was
It's
based on
Linux,
PHP. Yeah,
Apache, MySQL, PHP.
thank you. Yeah, so LAMP, they did Angular along with what was uh, not
ExpressJS.
the NoSQL,
Oh, Mongo.
the MongoDB. And so there was Angular and something else on the back end. See, this is how you can tell that I
It,
moved
it
so
was
much
the
into
mean
UI.
stack, right? It was like
A mean, thank you.
it was
I don't even know what
MySQL,
is going on in the
ExpressJS,
back end anymore.
Angular, and Node,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay. See,
yeah.
I
So
got I got
me,
my acronyms and anagrams, acronyms down, whatever word.
and then they did Ruby on Rails and Angular on top of that. And so I actually did pretty decent at kind of doing all of full stack. And that was really the direction I wanted to go at the start of my career, or at least that's what I thought. Um, and then as I got into actual software development, I was like, there is way too much to kind of cover to truly be full stack. Not to say you can't, it's just there's so much to it. Um, and so how I kind of originally thought was, okay, I'll start out in the UI and get really good at the UI and then go full. And then I kind of got into UI and was like, no, I don't want to go full. Like I like UI.
I think technically speaking, when I picked my first language, it was because I wanted to build my teenage website full of like anime characters and little pixel art things, right? But I think my actual first chosen language was PHP. And
Hmm.
that is because, it was at a time where I learned about WordPress, and WordPress was written in PHP. And I really wanted to learn how to build my own themes and plugins and all that so I could make my teenage websites. Um, but because I learned PHP first, or technically third, right? If you count HTML as a programming language, which
Right.
arguably is not. But because I learned PHP first, I kind of learned like, all the basics, like what is a variable, what is an array, what is a class. I learned all of that in PHP. So, it kind of set me on a path to like be a sort of back end person. But because of the weird ways that PHP worked back then, it felt odd because your PHP was often mixed in with your HTML. So you're like, am I really doing back end here, or is
Well,
this
on top of
front
that,
end?
like you would have like a front end PHP document
Right.
that would talk to a back end PHP. And so like you would pass it off whatever information collected, and then like the back end PHP would do something, and then
Right.
hand it off to like another front end document. It was like, okay, this is like I remember working through PHP, like even prior to going to the boot camp, I did some PHP work as like a side job, and it just was like, oh, like now I sit there going, Ajax is so much friendlier.
There's also the common misconception that programming is all about algorithms and data structures. But I think at least the several years I spent as a UI developer, I didn't really run into needing to know any real algorithms unless you're doing some sort of fancy DOM traversal, maybe, right? But um largely you can get away without it. Would you agree?
Yes and no. Or for the most part, yeah, in the UI, you don't do a lot of algorithm work. Um, but I think that to understand performant UI, you actually need to understand some amount of algorithms.
Right. Like to understand like if your loop within a loop within a loop within a loop is actually gonna work out for you, you kind of need a basic concept of what performant things are, right?
And not only that, or so it's whether it's loop work or kind of structuring your DOM to kind of be iterable, because sometimes you like actually have to go through the DOM and kind of manipulate it. Um, there's a lot there where if you're not careful, you could crash the UI, and then yeah, you're going to quickly learn that hey, algorithms and kind of being aware of memory and different things are actually important.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I didn't really focus on the algorithms and data structures part until I became more of a back end person and I lost interest in the UI. And then once I became a back end person, suddenly it was like, I feel like I need to know these algorithms and data structures, right? So I went through like this phase of like a year or two where I would read books on algorithms and I would take courses online about algorithms and I would just and I would like it wasn't like just one course or like one book. It was like I would read anything and everything to learn as much as I can about algorithms and find ways to apply it. But, even then, like I don't think a whole lot about it. Like occasionally the knowledge you gain from learning algorithms and data structures, it's just it's just something you can apply that thinking to in your work, but you're not being like, oh, I have to build a search. I'm gonna use a binary search here, right? Like it's more of a way
Yeah,
of
I tend to
thinking.
think it's more of like a hang up when it's an interview. Like
Right,
it's one of those things where you have to all of a sudden you're like, oh, this thing that I haven't really used for a while, I actually need to kind of get good
right.
at again. But but usually the only time it comes up is usually some sort of edge case where
Right.
I actually have to go and think about this and think of how to properly handle this.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that is common when learning to be a developer or software engineer or whatever is following tutorials, which is a good and a bad, right? Like if you're just trying to build one specific thing, following a tutorial can get you there from, start to finish, assuming they walk you all the way through. But then it can be a downer when it comes to actually understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Were you a tutorial follower, or would you like, if you were learning something, would you prefer to follow a tutorial kind of thing, or would you prefer to like just grind your teeth and see if you could figure it out?
It depends. So, like, for the most part, I don't like tutorials. I tend to see them as cheat sheets.
Yeah.
And so I rarely use something like that. The only time that I generally use them is when I'm switching jobs and they have a different tech stack and it's something that I don't know.
Right.
And so I'll go into the tutorial, to kind of get up to speed or at least be able to start, you know, the ground running. Um, Other than that, to the day to day, I'd rather just use the technology and use, whatever, whether it's the language or a framework, and kind of figure out the things on my own. Um, Mainly just because, like, or as problems come up, it's easier to kind of read about the concepts behind something and absorb it through a real world situation. At least for me, that works better than just kind of be like, okay, let me do this little small snippet of code, and that's going to teach me everything I need to know. It's like,
Yeah,
no, it's not.
I agree. And it's really hard to know how to think about how to build something when you're just following someone else's thinking, because oftentimes tutorials don't really go into, oh, this is why I'm doing it and here are all the other things that I talked about. They just give you a solution. They're like, oh, we wrote this code because this line connects to the database and this line does this and this line does that.
And on
So
top of that, you don't always know like the person who's writing that tutorial and if they actually know what they're talking about. And so, unless it's actually by the company that generates whatever you're working with, it could be a little bit dangerous to rely on a straight tutorial.
yeah. So let's go into reasons of why people go into software engineering. I think
Mhm.
the number one biggest reason is money.
Obviously.
Um, do you think that, okay, well, let me back up. Was money any sort of motivator for you to become a software engineer?
Oh yeah. Let's be honest. I mean, I used to be a restaurant manager, and the pay compared to software engineering is vastly different. And so, you know, while I worked much harder as a restaurant manager,
Yeah,
I am paid a lot more for software development. Whether like it or not, the market for software developers is a lot harder, and so you could demand more money.
but do you think you could do this job without like if you weren't actually interested in programming and you were just only doing it for the money, do you think you could have hung in there for like multiple years, or like
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really like, or I really enjoy the UI. Like, I really say like,
right,
it's
but
like
if it wasn't for that enjoyment, like
if I didn't have that enjoyment, probably not.
right,
Like, if the money wasn't there and I didn't have the enjoyment portion, um, I can't imagine staying in there. Like it's something I feel like I do well, and so maybe because I do it well, it would be enough to kind of skate by on. Um, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously we don't live in that world, and so
I for myself, I honestly don't think that money can be the sole motivator. Not saying that you can't be a software engineer just for the money, but I would think that it'd be hard to find the motivation and the drive to get really good at what you do, right?
sorry, I disagree with you there. I think that someone who's completely motivated by the money portion can do okay.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of developers I know where I'm like, you're just basically skating by because you know, have some base level of knowledge, not because you actually have tried to become really good at this.
Right.
And they do okay. Um, and so to me, that clearly shows that, yes, you can do it for the money.
Oh yeah,
And
you can do it for the money. What I'm trying to say is if you're only doing it for the money, you will remain at a level, you won't reach your truest potential compared to someone that is really into it and is going to learn everything and explore things, right? Like you can be successful, a professional, you can be a successful professional software engineer. Wow, that's a really long description. A successful professional software engineer and make good money and have a good career, but there's a difference between like being able to live your life and pay for things versus like actually finding fulfillment in what you do, right? Like I don't think you're going to find fulfillment if you don't enjoy what you do and
I don't know about that because or to me, I think that you can get different fulfillment from your professional life. So meaning that you may not enjoy coding that much, but you do it as your profession, but you get better at it because you want to reach the next level. So you want to move from being a SWE to a senior SWE or to staff. Like that motivates you to become better, but you
right.
still may not love coding. You know, you may be motivated by the money factor of you want more money, and so generally you have to get better at your job to make more money.
That's true.
So just because you're not passionate about coding doesn't mean it's going to equal not
I think where
reaching.
the danger lies is I think where the danger lies is that when you reach a comfortable amount of money, right? Like it if if you know if you're like if I just hit, you know, let's just pick an arbitrary number, $100,000, I can live comfortably and I'd be great. I'd be
Mhm.
fine with just sitting there, as they say, just coast. And
Right.
as long as you keep your job, right? And you will have no drive to like move forward. So I guess that person's fulfillment will just come from like meeting their target income, right? But then when I look at it from you spend, you know, most of your time, awake time doing that job, I would want to do a job that I really enjoy that so
I think you're right in that. I think that if you are doing it for either money or for the acclaim of getting to different levels, that eventually you're going to plateau because you're doing it to achieve those things. And so it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I always want to be the best engineer I could possibly be. And that's your motivation.
right.
And so if that's your motivation, it's always going to push you a little bit further than, or a lot further than just being interested in other aspects of the job.
Yeah. How do you go about learning? Like, what resources do you or have you used in the past to kind of start learning about like different things? Like, I know you said you kind of went to college, you took some courses, but like clearly, like, not every job is around those college courses. So, do you have any like resource where
Uh,
or a place you get inspiration from?
I'm weird in that I'll read source code. And so, like, I go into other people's code. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting way of doing that. And so it could be for the good or for the bad too. Like sometimes I like think about, I'm like, oh, that seems problematic. Uh, PR reviews,
Yeah.
like looking at other people's code, I think it teaches you a lot. Um, I think that people who don't do PR reviews, you can tell that they're not doing them. Um, but just as I said before, not being afraid of taking a task. Like,
Right. Yeah.
you know, if it, even as daunting as it may seem to kind of, build that thing that, oh, I'm not capable of doing that. That's above my pay level.
Yeah.
Like, being working through that and achieving it, like, it teaches you a lot. Because generally how it goes is I hit a blocker and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to go read that API documentation, or I'm going to have to go into Stack Overflow and see what people have to say about this. Like, it kind of spawns me into doing the actual research where I generally will not do that on my own because I'm not a big reader. Like, I like to do things rather than actually read about them. So by having a task in front of me, it kind of forces me to do things I may not like to do.
That's true. Well, I am a big reader and listener and media consumer, which I actually hate. Like, I hate consuming so many things. Like, I wish I was just a reader, but that's not me. Um, so, for me, I read a lot, especially technical books. Like, for some reason, I have this strange ability to read very boring things that are related to programming and enjoy it, whereas like who else wants to read a giant book about algorithms? Like most people don't, right? I think most people would opt for a course or a video showing them walking through it, but me, I've read several. Um and I can include some links of the ones below. I also watch a lot of programming videos and like YouTubers, for the lack of a better thing. But I wouldn't say that I learn from YouTubers or Twitch streamers, right? Like
I
it's
tend to
really hard because a part of me knows like they're putting on a show. Their
exactly,
their
like, it's
primary
entertainment
job is to
value.
be an entertainer, not a teacher,
Yeah.
right?
Or to me, like, or like, if I read or if I watch something where it's supposed to be kind of informational, one, I don't know that that person actually knows their stuff.
Right.
So there's that. And then two, it's a lot of times they're cracking jokes, they're trying to engage the user. And so, yeah, there's a lot of entertainment value there where some of the information is probably going to get lost.
Right.
Um, so for me, like, there's some podcasts I listen to um, when it comes to like either accessibility or coding, but that's probably the only like other media that I would consume outside of just API.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't consume too many podcasts, ironically, because I'm doing this one. um, but like, what's one podcast that you would no doubt recommend to someone getting into programming? Do you have one, or are all your podcasts not related to programming?
Or there's two, but I don't know that, or I would suggest them. Or it's not a case of they actually like teach you about programming. They actually teach you like the history, and I don't know if that actually helps with anything. And
I'd be interested in that, but I'm kind of a nerd that way.
so it kind of feels like, it kind of gives you the background to maybe understand some how things got to be the way they are.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they're like actually informative when it comes to like actually doing.
Yeah, I watch like some YouTubers. I actually don't watch them on YouTube. I actually watch them on Twitch. So ever since I got on Twitch, I stopped watching YouTube videos. Um, but even with the content that I regularly watch, I don't necessarily learn something from them as much as I'm entertained and maybe sometimes, I gain motivation to go try something very different, right?
Mhm.
So like I regularly watch like the Primogen, who is a YouTuber, I guess. More, I don't know, like a Twitch streamer, YouTuber. But I can honestly say I have never learned anything from him. And I feel bad. I'm sorry.
Sorry if you watch this.
I'm sorry, Prime. I never learned anything from you, but what I get from watching, aside from entertainment, what I get from watching is just like, I just enjoy watching people be excited about it, right? Like when he gets
Yeah.
into programming, or like when he gets into talking about his life or his career or building something on the stream, it's like, it's so fun to watch that happen, right? It's like, oh man, this weekend I'm gonna go work on a project that excites me just as much or something, right?
Right.
Like not everything you consume has to be educational. Sometimes it's like, oh man, this person like works really hard to like try and do something they like doing. I'm gonna go and do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
What is your end goal with being a software engineer? Is it really to make a living? Is it to work in big tech, to do UI work that you enjoy? Like, what would you say your end goal is?
It used to be that I was wanted to be an architect, or it would be like now it'd be considered like I guess staff, platform staff, or staff platform, whatever it is. Um, because I thought that that was like really cool that like someone knew that much about the tech stack. um, Now I would just say just doing the best UI work I could possibly do. Like I
Yeah,
really like I enjoy that portion of the work. And I've realized the higher you go up, the more you get disconnected from the code base.
yeah,
Um, and so I don't really want to do that. Like I enjoy working on the code. Um, and yes, and makes a good living, and so therefore, I'm happy with that too. So it's a combination of those, I would say.
yeah, yeah. I think my end goal would be to just learn more things, because I think I mentioned this last time, but programming was my hobby first and my profession second. So, I still treat it as my hobby, and like I kind of compartmentalize it. Like right now, this is a hobby. This podcast even is just a hobby. Programming, all the crap I do in my free time is a hobby. And my brain like switches. Like I think about professional work way differently than I think about, you know, all the crazy stuff I do off.
But for me, it's funny because like in my free time, like the only way that programming comes into it is like when I'm like programming for smart home stuff. Like me turning on my lights automatically at a specific event is cool to me, but like actually like writing up an API to kind of allow things to talk to each other and be like, can someone else do that for me?
But would you say there's any like programming smart homes? Now, I've never actually done that before, but how much programming is involved? Like, could you still say that programming is your hobby?
Surprisingly, a lot. So, or because I've been in like doing smart home stuff for I want to say about 15 years.
Wow.
And so because of that, like I'm on a really older platform called it's like Insteon, um, where it has like this old like WYSIWYG Java um, environment.
Yeah.
And so all the time I'm like, oh, there's a bug in my code because this light's not turning on when it's supposed to, or it's turning on at a different rate than the rest of the lights. And so I'm like, okay, I need to go in and figure out why that's happening. And so or when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing was programming. Now I'm like, oh my god, there's a lot of programming in this. So yeah,
Would you
like that actually teaches me some too.
would you say that's a if someone was really into like making their home a smart home, would you say
Mhm.
that's a good entryway into programming? Like, do you think you could get started doing that?
Yeah, or specifically like writing up automations,
Yeah.
it teaches you a lot about like conditions and async, because all of a sudden you'll notice, oh, this event happened, but this didn't occur, or it happened out of order, and so you kind of have to kind of think it out. And so it actually kind of does teach you a different way of thinking about it.
I'm gonna have to try this. I have no desire for a smart home, really, but that sounds interesting. See?
Well, and plus on top of that, like I have, or so I have the Insteon system, I have Hue, and I have my shades and like plant sensors and all these different things. And like I figured out like, okay, I've installed this system to basically allow me to allow these two different things to talk to each other. And
Yeah.
so that system basically like controlled my entertainment system along with my lights. And so like it's not only just like, you know, dealing with one system, you kind of have to have like different systems talking to each other. And so it's kind of cool.
So it's like a home appliance broker.
Exactly.
All right. All right. Well, I think that's it. That's all.
Talk to you next time.
See ya. Bye.